Alrighty. How are we? Cool. Thanks for coming. So my name is Paco Cruz. I work for Deloitte in the cloud engineering practice. And the session for today is going to be extending your Azure Integration Solutions using OpenAI. How many of you have used Azure Integration? Yeah, some few people. And what about OpenAI? Yeah, some people. So good. So hopefully this session gives you good idea of how to mix the two technologies together. And I want to thank the organizers like Bill and James. So they have been working really hard to make this event happen. It's great to be here, to be able to share knowledge and just to connect with people. It's just a great opportunity to do networking and keep learning. So I want to thank them, and also, of course, the sponsors for helping with providing a bit of money to get the venue and food and all of that. So thanks. I'm very thankful for that. So as I mentioned, I'm Paco de la Cruz. Good to see some familiar faces here. I'm going to be talking about integration and OpenAI, but really my specialty is mostly on integration, distributed applications, and also most lately building cloud application platforms. On Azure, since I started my career, I've been working with the Microsoft technology stack, and most recently with Azure. So I've been recognized as an MVP for 6 years now. And besides work, so I love keep learning, right? So I love keep learning about software engineering, now AI, cloud, and outside work, I love learning about parenting. I have 2 beautiful daughters, and so I love learning about parenting, experimenting with them, and then learning about health. My body is not as young anymore. I'm over 40, so I try to keep learning about body weight and mobility training and all of that. So if you want to read my blog, this is my personal website, and the code that I'm going to be showing today is on my GitHub. So if you want to have a look and play around, hopefully you find it useful. Alrighty. So the agenda for today. So first I'm going to start with a disclaimer and setting the expectations for the session. And then later I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Azure OpenAI, how you can access Azure OpenAI if you want to play around with it. And then James gave very, very nice talk this morning about prompt and prompt engineering. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of what are prompts and prompt engineering. And then we're going to jump into the demo. And then I'm going to share some thoughts and what I can highlight from the sample application that I built. And then also some constraints and considerations that we need to bear in mind when building solutions like this. And let's try to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm going to leave some time at the end for Q&A, but if you have any questions, just let me know. And before I continue, I need to share with you some disclaimers and setting the expectations. I haven't built a commercial application using these technologies, right? So I have built a lot of solutions building using Azure integration, but I haven't used OpenAI yet. Some of my colleagues have been doing it. I haven't. So just for you to know that I don't have that experience yet. But however, I've been using Gen AI models for some time, just for my personal learning, just for curiosity and to boost my productivity. Still early days in Gen AI models. And the demo I'm going to share, it was an experiment for me. So when I read that the Global Azure Bootcamp was coming, I said I want to present. What's the topic I want to present? So I did a bit of a POC for my demo before submitting my application, but I hadn't finished it at that time. So it was an experiment, and I'm going to share my learnings with you today. So my goals, and hopefully you don't get disappointed because I haven't deployed this in a commercial environment yet, but my goals with you is to share in a small scale what's possible using these technologies. And also, I want to inspire you to explore how you can leverage these technologies to solve problems in your own personal projects or in your own organization. Okay. So Azure OpenAI, right? This is a very brief overview just for you to understand what we're going to be using today. So OpenAI is one of the many organizations that are currently developing AI models. So Meta, Google, AWS, Microsoft, and OpenAI, many organizations, and also startups, right? So OpenAI is one of them. And they are very famous for ChatGPT, right? So they released ChatGPT and they became very popular. And some of the models they have is GPT-4. This is the one that we're going to be using today. Is based on generating or understanding natural language. So it's all about understanding natural language and also code. And then ChatGPT, so probably you played around with it. It's kind of like a specialized implementation of GPT that is focused on conversational models, right? So when you're building conversational applications, that's ChatGPT, but it's built on top of GPT. Then there is also DALL-E, which is for generating and editing images. And also Whisper for converting audio into text. And then there's another one which is under development at the moment, which is Sora. You can give natural language prompts and then generates video for you. But again, the one that we're going to be using today is GPT-4. And Azure OpenAI is a service that grabs the OpenAI APIs within the Azure environment. So the previous topic in this track was about securing your AI applications. So you have the OpenAI APIs, but then on top of that, you can use networking controls. You can do a bit of extra security controls, governance, and also all the data you're using for interacting with OpenAI remains within your tenant, right? So it's not used to train the models. It's not logged anywhere. So you know that all your data remains within your tenant, both the inputs and the outputs. Then if you have an Azure subscription, you need to do some bits to enable OpenAI. So first you need to request access to OpenAI. It doesn't come by itself. Then you need to sign some agreements there. Once you have that, then you first deploy an OpenAI resource. As you were deploying like an Azure function, for example, service bus on API management, you first deploy a resource and then deploy models, right? In this case, I had to deploy a GPT-4 model. Once you deploy the model, you get an OpenAPI endpoint, right? So like URL, and then a key, right? So you with those two fields or values with endpoint and API key, you're able to start interacting with your API. And you can do it via Studio. So once you have your resource, you jump into the Studio, you can give prompts and then you get outcomes there directly. But then there are also SDKs where you can do it programmatically. So today I'm going to be using the C# SDK, but you can do it on Python, Java, Go, and Spring, so many languages. You can also interact directly using the REST API. So once you have the model deployed, then you start giving prompts. How many of you have given prompts to ChatGPT or yeah, many of you, cool. So you're familiar with what prompts are, right? So these are natural language instructions where you give a task and a context. It's not only the task that is important, it's also the context, right? And this is really, when you don't see that the model is providing the output that you're expecting, most of the times is because you're not giving enough context. So it's very important that you give both task and the context. And engineering is a process to do this systematically, right? It's like when you first started using search engines, for example, right? So at the beginning, you were not getting the results you were expecting in the first time, right? But you started learning, okay, I need to use keywords, and I can use quotes, I can use logical operators and all of that, right? So you started learning little by little. It's the same for prompt engineering. So you start giving your prompts, and then you need to test them and check what's happening, and then you fine-tuning them. So you do this iteratively. There are some strategies for that. You need to give very clear instructions. The clearer, the better. In the previous session by Sarah in this track, she was mentioning that the AI cannot read your mind. Let's see if she can do it, or if he can do it. I don't know if AI is a female or a male, but if it can do it, let's see if it read my mind during my demo. And then if you provide some reference text, like for example, you can say, I want my answer to be like this, right? So then you're helping the AI to be better at providing the outcomes you're expecting. When you have a complex task, it's good that you can split it, right? So you can say, okay, first resolve this subtask, and then resolve this, and then resolve this. So you can have that, and you're helping the AI model to be better at providing the outcome that you're expecting. One of the strategies that OpenAI suggests is give the model time to think, right? It's just a metaphor. And really what they're saying is, if you ask the model, for example, give me your thought process, right? Give me your thought process. You're helping the model to say, okay, this is what you're asking me. This is my response, and this is how I came up with this solution, right? So when you ask the model about this thought process, sometimes you're helping the model to be more structured in the way it's producing the outcome. And then, very importantly, you need to test the outcomes that you're receiving systematically and checking if they're aligned to what you're expecting. And that's going to help to be better at prompting or prompt engineering. And even though this is not part of prompting, it's also very important that when you are working with the AI models, the Gen AI models, there is a parameter called temperature. 0 in OpenAI, 0 meaning low temperature, well, from 0 to 1. And 0 meaning be as precise as possible, be as factual as possible. 1 is be as random and creative as possible. So when your task is write me a poem about why Global Azure is great, or why all the attendees are great by being here, right? You can tell the model be as creative as possible. But if you want to be as factual as possible, then you tell the model have a temperature of 0. We're going to see that in the code. So when you combine your prompts and the temperature, this is how you start configuring your model to get the outcome that you're expecting. Any questions so far? Nope. All righty. Okay, so that was the context. Now for the demo. So as I mentioned, when I was talking to James about submitting a topic for the conference, I had some requirements in mind, right? And this is because it's a very, very common problem in integration, right? It's a very old problem in integration. So as a business user, I have business requirements. I have business rules that I want to use in my integration solution. And I want to be able to define those business rules as a business user. I don't know how to code. And then I want to be able to update those business rules without having to change the code, right? So those were my 2 requirements. And then this is my own demo process. So I created some hypotheses for myself, right? So my first hypothesis was we can use Gen AI to solve an old integration problem, which is having a business rules engine, right? There are business rules engine in the market, but I wanted to see if Gen AI could act as a business rules engine. Next hypothesis was we can create AI model prompts to implement business rules. So I can see if I can implement business rules as just an AI prompt. I can define them in natural language. I can update them without changing code. And I am able to test the outcomes. Right? So this is what I wanted to test. And these hypotheses, I had them at the beginning, but they were not ready when I submitted my talk. So I had to keep evolving my demo to test this after I submitted my talk. All right. So for my demo, I had to pick a business scenario, right, that I could implement a business rules engine. And I wanted to pick the best possible scenario for this talk. And I wanted to have the most fun business scenario for this talk. So I said, okay, what's the thing that I love the most when I'm at work? And then I had an idea. So how many of you have submitted business expenses in your organization to get reimbursed? Yeah, some of you. And how many of you love that process of submitting expenses? And none of you. Some of you. Okay, so probably I picked the wrong scenario. I thought everybody would love to submit expenses at work. Probably not. Okay, so hopefully I don't regret. But I picked that scenario. Because I was submitting my expenses and I was thinking about my demo at the same time. It's like, oh, this is so much fun. So let's do the business rules engine using a business expense approval process. So this is my solution. The solution is I have an expense claim in JSON format that I'm going to upload into a blob container. Right? Very simple. Then I will have a logic app. Now I'm going to start using integration solutions, integration components here. I have a logic app that is reading from that blob, and I'm going to implement the business rules engine now. Right? So then I want to have business rules that are written in natural language, just plain natural language, that I'm going to feed to an Azure function, and the Azure function is going to combine the business rules the business rules with the expense document, and then send it to OpenAI, and then ask OpenAI, can you assess this expense to tell me if it's approved or not, right? So I want to make this approval or reaction automatically. And based on that, the logic app will receive the response from the Azure function and then save the expense in the corresponding folder. Pretty simple, but I wanted to test my hypothesis, right? Now, I could have interacted with the OpenAI directly from the logic app, right? So OpenAI is just a HTTP endpoint. I could have done it directly from the logic app. So the reason I wanted to introduce the Azure function in the middle was because I wanted to do automated testing, and I just wanted to do it using XUnit, right? I could have used Postman, for example, and call the logic app directly, but I wanted to do it with XUnit. So that's why I introduced the Azure function, right? But I could have done it directly from the logic app. Is the scenario clear? Yeah? Cool. So let's jump into the demo. Alrighty. So can you read? Oh, no. So let me. Can you read? Is it too small? Yeah, you can read? All right. So this is the prompt that I am giving to OpenAI to act as a business rules engine. So I'm telling OpenAI, you're a business rules engine that specializes in business expense claims approvals. You receive an expense in JSON format, and then you will return an output in the JSON format as well. So I'm telling, I don't want natural language as an outcome. I'm telling, return a JSON, and I'm giving a sample, right? Remember, one of the strategies was to give an example. So I'm giving an example saying, this is the JSON payload that I'm expecting. Now you're going to assess the expense, and you're going to return in the status field, approved, rejected, or requires manual approval. And then you're going to give the status reason. You're going to populate the status reason field with explaining why you either approved or rejected the expense. And this is particularly important for those that were not approved. You need to specify the status reason clearly so the user can get the reason why the expense was not approved. And I'm telling the model, be as precise and deterministic as possible when calculating the status, right? So GenAI can have hallucinations, so I don't want to have hallucinations here. Does this make sense? All natural language, yeah? And then I split my prompt into two files, not because it was required for the program, it was because this part is not meant to change, and then the business rules can change, right? So if I was implementing this in a real world solution, I would put this static and then the business rules dynamic, yeah? Because the business users would want to change the business rules every now and then. So second part of the prompt, these are my rules. So I have 3 rules for meals and 4 rules for flights. So, and for meals, I'm checking if it's a weekday or a weekend, and then the employee level, if the expense is for the boss or for someone else, right? So for example, for meals, I'm saying if the meal occurred during the weekday and the employee is not a boss, then it's only approved if it's equal or under 50 AUD, otherwise must be rejected. Then I have similar rule for the weekend, but I'm saying return status of requires manual approval. Yeah. And then for the boss, everything is approved unless it's greater than 1,000, which must be rejected. Yeah. And then for flights, I'm saying if it's a domestic flight within Australia, and the employee is not a boss, and the amount is less than 1,500, then it must be approved, otherwise rejected. And then if it's international, under 3,000 must be requires manual approval, otherwise rejected. And then if it's a flight for a boss, domestic and international, different thresholds, right? Does it make sense? Yeah, question?
This format like dash in the beginning, does it matter or is just for yourself?
For myself, yeah. So it's not YAML, nothing. Like this is just natural language. I could have just delete the dashes. Yeah, good observation.
The previous one, the sequence mattered in the previous one, the instructions that you gave?
Not really. Sometimes you swap the order of your sentences and the outcome is different and you don't know why, right? But it shouldn't matter, really. Yeah?
If you send the same instruction every time, do you always get the same response?
Is a non-deterministic model? No. So in terms of status reason, no. The status reason can change. I've asked the model to be as deterministic and factual as possible when returning the status, right? And that's why I wanted to do automated testing, right? But let's get to that a bit later, yeah? Cool. Any other questions? All good?
Does this rules always has to be in the natural language, or we can put some of like a kind of a JSON rules as well here?
You can put JSON rules, but I wanted to test using natural language because I'm testing OpenAI, right? But you can say my rules are in JSON or YAML. Yeah, you could potentially. There are some business rules engine that accept JSON, right? So I wanted to make it as close as possible to natural language just to show the value of these models, yeah?
And does it matter like how you actually write that up? Like the words that you put in the business language, if you change that, does your output matters on those languages, on those words?
So the results are non-deterministic, right? So just to give you an example, here I'm saying employee level is not boss. In my JSON, I'm using employee level, but originally I put employee type because I didn't check my JSON. I just put employee type, boss, and it still worked, right? So it makes some deductions. The model makes some deductions, yeah? Cool. Alrighty. So let me show you now the function. So this is my Azure function. It's very simple. So it receives a body post method, read the request, validating the request body. Then I'm calling my service layer, process expense claim, sending the payload, then generating the response. This is just the wrapper, right? This is just the wrapper. Now let's go to my service layer. And go to definition. So my service layer is a bit more interesting, but still very dumb, very, very dumb. So if you see here, as I mentioned, you create your Azure OpenAI resource, and then you create your deployment, right? So in this case, I create a deployment which is GPT-4. Then temperature, I'm setting it as close to 0 because I wanted this to be as deterministic as possible. I'll get to your question later, Will. And then messages. So I'm combining. So if you see here, I have a helper method. I'm reading my both prompts and combining into one, right? So I'm actually sending both as a single string, right? So the context and the business rules just as a single string. And I'm sending this as a system message, yeah? And then I'm sending the expense claim as a user message. That's the way this SDK is designed. So it expects a context, which is, in this case, is the context and the business rules, and then the user input, which is just a JSON payload, yeah? So this is how the SDK is working. But to be honest, in the background, we are just saying a single prompt saying, this is the context, these are the business rules, access this JSON document, right? That's what's happening in the background. But in the SDK, it's just two different parameters. Okay? Does it make sense? Okay. If you see the code is super dumb, right? The code is super dumb. I'm just sending a prompt saying execute it in natural language, right? Super, super dumb.
Just one question. Do you need to define the deployment name and temperature within the code, or you can define it at a service level?
Yeah, good question. So I won't share my actual file because it includes secrets, but I prepared a sample just in case someone was asking. So what you're putting here is just endpoint, the OpenAI key, the model, in this case GPT-4, and then temperature is 0, right? Because I wanted this to be as deterministic.
I understand that. I'm asking, this is a function code, right?
Yes.
This is function.
Yes.
Do you need to define that GPT-4 and 0 in the function level, or at the OpenAI, when you are creating the OpenAI resource, you define?
Yes, the model is on that side. The function is just an Azure function.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's calling just a HTTP endpoint. Doesn't know anything about OpenAI. So I'm using the SDK just to make it easier, but the function is calling a HTTP endpoint. Yeah, and it's calling that API and receiving a response. That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
So when you deployed your OpenAI resource,
Mm-hmm.
you deployed the model. That's that connection.
Yes, it will get, when you deploy the model, you get a URL, you get a key, and that's it. You start calling
You
it.
can use that API URL to hit that and get the result.
Yes.
Understood.
So behind the SDK, behind the scenes, the SDK just making a HTTP call to this endpoint. I mean, I masked it with the API key as a header, and then a post body with the prompt, right? And it will yeah, very simple.
You could have deployed 4 models within that OpenAI resource.
Oh yeah.
This is just one of those.
Yeah. And then you can have different keys, and then you can optimize it for larger payloads. Yeah, so that you can do some kind of optimizations as well. Yeah, cool. Alrighty. So that's the code. So now what I'm gonna be doing now is I'm gonna run it locally. So I'm gonna run it locally, and then I have a Postman collection here, right? So this is the payload I'm gonna be using. So if you remember, I never told the model this is the schema for the request. I just told the model you're gonna receive a JSON payload, right? And then if you see here, we have employee level manager, and then this is a flight. Let's start with meals. Right, let's start with meals. Sorry. So this is a meal for a manager, date, amount. Yeah, that's it. So what I'm going to be sending, this is the payload I'm sending. And then, fingers crossed, demo gods are good to me now. There you go. So for this request, approved, and then it's explaining what's happening, right? Expenses of type meals during the weekday and employee level is not boss, is equal or under 50, it's approved, right? So it's explaining, paraphrasing my rule, right? It's not exactly the rule I wrote, but it's paraphrasing my rule. It's explaining why it approved it, right? Now, I didn't, and this is where, I don't know if OpenAI models can read my mind or not, but I didn't tell the model, use the date field to know if it was a weekday or a weekend. I didn't told the model. I just said, if it's a weekday or a weekend, do this, right? So it's telling me, it's a weekday, okay, so on the 50, it's approved, yeah?
And also, it doesn't say the date of what, like when you did the expense, or when you, like how did it know that this is the actual date?
Oh yeah, it assumed that it's the date of the expense, yeah? So it's not the date of submission, yeah.
Submission.
Yeah. So if let's make it weekend, for example. So now I'm putting the 20th of April, which is today, right? So then this should be requires a manual approval, right? Because weekday. Interesting. And this happened to me. Yeah. Now I don't know. So sometimes it's non-deterministic, right? So this is rejected, that's fine, because this is above 50. And today is...
How does it know the daytime format, the date format?
No, it should be like this is the first time it fails with Postman, and that's where the demo gods are not good. And this is coming back to your question, Will. The code is not deterministic, and it's one of the lessons learned. And actually, the temperature is 0, so it should be as deterministic as possible. It was working every time I run it on Postman. And when I did my test cases...
Did you update the business rule after that?
Pardon?
Have you updated the business rule?
No, I haven't. Let me change. So I'm going to change the...
Weekend requires man.
So now it's telling me it's weekend. So this is tomorrow.
It's not considering as weekend.
Yeah, apparently. Let me try it again with... Let's see. That's very strange. It was working this morning. I promise. I promise. It was working this morning. So I need to change one of my lights.
So you were working on the Saturday to build this, so it thinks that Saturday is a working day.
Yes, exactly. Thanks for that, Atul. Exactly. Yeah, it's very intelligent. Like,
I think that's where it's really important to work on the system prompt, right? On the system prompt
yes.
doesn't fully understand all the requirements, right? Because you could have said a weekend in Australia, right? Or a weekend in Victoria.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
go very, very precise. And sometimes it's even a single word, like I would like you to, or you must.
Yes.
You get different results depending on that word.
100%. And my prompt before, it was use the date field to calculate if it was a weekend. It never failed. But I wanted to delete that line this morning because I wanted to check if it could read my mind. But then it was too risky, right? It was too risky. 100%. So the more context you give, the better, right?
Yeah, but then the more context you give, the more expensive each prompt is.
Yes, and the less efficient will be your request will be. Yes, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, good call.
Example.
Yeah, it's a perfect sample, right? And I didn't think it will fail this time, but it did, right? So this is a
point that you just made. The more, what was the comparison?
So
Context
the more context, if you think I'm gonna just put my whole employee handbook into the system prompt, one, you're gonna run out of OpenAI tokens, right? Because OpenAI has very, very limited token sizes, unfortunately. And the more expensive the overall request gets, like actual money expensive. So the larger the prompt, the more tokens you consume, the more expensive each request gets.
yes, 100%. Yeah, cool. But I want to take the risk, and I removed that line, right? And
You want to take to not spend that much money.
exactly. Save some tokens. Yeah. So, well, yeah, these are the meals. Now, if we go to flights, hopefully this time it reads my mind. So I'm going to start with this one, right? So it's a bus. It's a flight. This is the amount. So this one should be approved. And you're a flight expert. Do you know these airport codes? These are easy.
I'm not.
BNE, LAX. Brisbane, Los Angeles. Yeah. Cool. Yes. So.
Likely quanta 16.
Very perfect. So in this time it read my mind, right? I didn't explain the model. Use this description to know if the flight was international or not. I just gave airport codes. I didn't provide, this is the list of airport codes, right? But it has the training data to know, okay, this is Brisbane, this is Los Angeles. So this is an international flight there because then it's under 3,500, then this is approved, yeah?
Paco, can you change it now to Sydney?
Yeah, of course.
YD?
Yeah, of course.
This is what-
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It would probably say, why would you spend so much for a domestic?
You're spoiling my demo, Umair. So now it's telling is domestic, yeah?
Yeah, that's still.
But it's saying 205,000, but the amount is 3,450.
Wow, the demo gods are really playing up today, playing up really bad. So it should be.
Could be rejected.
And to be honest, I don't know if there is some kind of cache. So let's change this
I
to.
think that's the temperature.
It's 0 at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's why you're getting the same response back.
So
Sorry, because of what?
Because of the temperature and the prompt.
Sometimes when you not save in Postman, it's
but you see, like I think so, there's some kind of caching, right? I don't know because
It's server side. It's server side. that
Yeah.
gets the temperature. So because of the temperature, it tries to. There's a cache, and that's what my developer explained to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't try to go and reason around everything.
Everything again. Uh-huh.
Or, okay, I've seen this before.
Uh-huh.
And because of that temperature, it's not going to go and try to invent it.
Okay. So there is some kind of cache, and this is something I'm still learning, right? But for example, now I changed the amount is different, and now it's telling me is rejected or requires manual approval because it is a boss, right?
maybe there is a prompt like clear the cache before running this.
Yes, probably. We're all learning together. So I'm happy to learn in public, right? And we're all learning together. But for example, Hobart to Canberra, right? So you get the gist. Now, Umer was spoiling my demo here, but so what I want to do now is I'm gonna stop my, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say state the rule apply clearly. I'm gonna change the prompt. I'm gonna say using Aussie humor. Yeah, so I'm gonna run it again. So I'm still asking the model to return the reason why, but I'm asking the model to use Aussie humor. So if we go to this one, so well I'm gonna Melbourne to Perth, for example, 1600. This is a manager, right? So this is my previous request, but my previous request was already using Aussie humor. But let's call it again. Sorry, mate, you're not the big boss. Your domestic flight claim. Your domestic flight claim can be more than 1,500 AUD, right? So, and then, for example, so boss above. So this is a boss spending more than 1,000 on a meal, right? Let's see what we get. Oi, boss. You've had a bit too much of a feast there. Meals can exceed 1,000 AUD, right? So this is a domestic flight for the boss. Let's see. A bit over the top, isn't it? We need a human to check this one out. Yeah. So now I'm asking the model to use Aussie humor, right? Yeah. Now, to be honest, I didn't expect this kind of randomness. It didn't happen with Postman, but this time it happened. Demo gods, you know. But now, if we go to my project, so one of my hypotheses was to be able to test it, right? So then I'm going to run the test again. Hopefully, they all passed. We'll see. And while I run them, I'm going to show you the test code, which is pretty simple. So I'm not superstitious, and that's why I put 13 test cases in my project. So I have 13 payloads, right? So this is the payloads, and then what I'm asking in my test cases is, so I'm using XUnit. So XUnit, you can create theories where you put multiple test cases. All of them passed. So at least At least all of them passed in my Visual Studio. So I'm loading the file with the JSON, and then I'm saying check that it's either approved or rejected, and if it's not approved, I'm expecting a reason, right? So it is because in the prompt I'm saying if it's not approved, saying return a reason always, but particularly important for non-approved scenarios. And then what I'm doing is read the JSON payload. I'm checking the expense ID because I wanted to check. One thing I haven't mentioned is I gave the sample payload, right? But I never explained this is the JSON that you're going to be receiving, right? And somehow it read my mind that it had to map the ID here to expense ID here.
That saves so much of developer effort and doing the requirements gathering, mapping, explaining.
That's what I'm saying. Like it makes some deductions, right? I never told the model make sure that you include the expense ID, and the expense ID name is going to be field is going to be have a different name. I never told the model, but still doing it, right?
But if you put two different dates, one like expense date and claim date, will OpenAI understand which date to pick up?
I haven't done it, but it would be more risky, right? So, but I had that prompt in the beginning. Use this field to determine if it's a weekend or a weekday. Never failed, and I removed it early this week. I never had issues, and I said I'm going to keep it there because I want to show that it's reading my mind somehow. But yeah, failed this time, but that's okay. But this
Dependent on the model, like that's the
Prompt.
the prompt, yeah. But for example, it make the deduction that the airport code, right, to check if it's international or not, and then they also did the mapping without me telling the model, right? So in the test case, I wanted to check if the expense ID in my request is coming in the output, in the outcome, in the output. So I'm checking that. So I'm checking the expense ID is the same. I'm checking the status is the expected one, and I'm checking if it's not approved. The status reason is there, right? And at least all my 13 cases passed this time through Visual Studio, right? Temperature probably, I don't know. I need to check exactly how I deployed it last time because I've been doing this multiple times. But at least all the test cases pass here. Now, in the test cases, I have also the temperature parameter. So if I go here, so when I started increasing this 0.1, 0.2, then I think when I increased it to 0.3, then I was running exactly the same test cases, going back to the question wheel, and I would get one failing every 5 to 10 runs, right? So if I put temperature 0.3, then even the status was incorrect, right? And then I realized that the status was incorrect when the dollar amount was close to the threshold. If the dollar amount I was putting in my expense was 200 and the threshold was 1,000, then that would never fail. But if the threshold was 1,000 and my expense was 999.99 with a temperature of 0.3, then these test cases were failing. Yeah. So yeah. So this is coming back to your question: does it produce the same outcome? Now we saw it, not always, right? I need to check the temperature of my deployment. I think that's it for the demo. Oh, and if we go back to this slide now, right? So I just showed you the top part of the solution, right? So I just showed you so far the top part of the solution, so I'm going to show you now the bottom part. Yeah. But I spend most of the time there because that's the most interesting part of the demo. So if I go to Azure, so this is my Logic app. It's pretty simple. And I wanted to highlight that my solution is pretty simple. So all the AI process is happening on the OpenAI, right? So all these deductions and calculating and executing the business rules is happening in the OpenAI. So read when a blob is there, trigger the function, trigger the logic cap, get the content, parse it, call the Azure function that I just showed, parse the response, delete the original file, and then save the assessment. And I'm checking the status from my body, use it as a subfolder, and then save the body there. And then I'm also, and this was just for my testing, in the same file, I'm putting the input and the output. So I'm creating a new JSON document, inputs and outputs, so I'm able to see what's happening. And that's it. So now if we go to the output folder, there is nothing, right? There is nothing here. And then I'm gonna upload this to my input folder, or blob container, I should say. "13 files. Then just to make things quicker, I'm gonna run manually this, so to force it to run. And then we should see here the output. So what the logic app is doing is has the JSON files, and then calling the function. The function is doing everything we show, and then receiving the response, and then saving the outputs here, right? So this is how we are extending the integration solution using OpenAI, and these are the files, right? So these are the approved expenses and rejected. For example, so these are the same payload, so nothing new here, but just to show you. So now I'm concatenating the input, same payload we had in Postman for my test cases, and then the output is saying rejected and similar response. Creaky mate, even boss can have a meal of 1,000. Crikey, sorry. crikey mate. And then try keep it under, will ya? Cool. Any other questions on the demo? No? Is it good? Well, we're learning together, right? So I need to remove this sticker. I don't have this sticker anymore. I don't deserve this sticker anymore. But the highlights for the demo and the approach, right? So my hypotheses have been proven to be true so far on my machine. Well, not always. Most of the times they worked on my machine. It was working, as I mentioned, when I started increasing the temperature. I saw it stop working on the automated tests, but with temperature 0, it was working most of the time, all the time. But then I need to remove, as I mentioned, I need to remove this sticker. I don't deserve it anymore.
So far.
Yes. So far when I wrote, right, at the time of writing, exactly. At the time of writing, it had worked so far. Exactly. Yes. This is just the GPT for OpenAI.
Yeah, have you tried that application with other?
No, I haven't. No. But to be honest, I think your name Brian, yeah, if I remember correctly, your name Brian? No, Brian. David O'Brien. Yeah, I was confused with your last name. So as you're saying, if the more context you give, the more accurate the model will be, right? So.
It can be. So we've actually found, so we're using GPT-5 for an hour, and we're using them for different use cases. And even though 3.5 is a smaller number than 4, and people naturally want to use 4, 3.5 is actually cheaper and faster for certain things and better. And then we use 4 for the actual reasoning. So using different models, multimodal deployments, makes a lot of sense depending on the use case.
Yeah, thanks, David.
So if you write an application, you can try like lower model, which is cheaper and faster, and if it works, you don't need to go to Google.
Exactly, yeah.
And pay more money if it works anyway.
Yeah.
So you always choose lower model for cost.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, you can optimize it depending on your scenario, right? So we were able to create a business rules engine based on natural language. So I wanted to solve an old problem with a new technology. the AI model could make some useful deductions, right? So we saw with the airport codes and with the date that then didn't work, but then it worked. So and then we can use similar approaches with similar use cases, right? And really, it's like how can we start collaborating more with business users and developers, right? And I think we can. I don't think that we will reach a point where we can program directly on natural language, but probably we can compile natural language into something that is a bit more structured. Let's see. But then let's highlight also the constraints, right? So we saw some constraints live, right? So this was an experiment. It's not an endorsement. I cannot tell that, okay, go and deploy a business rules engine in your organization using natural language. Probably not. We're not there yet. And especially because these models are non-deterministic, right? We saw it. We can control this with the temperature, but not 100%. And then we're introducing ambiguity. Like people think different. I could have used different structure in my conditions and my natural language, right? So imagine troubleshooting or debugging that code. Good luck with that. Yeah. And complexity and unexpected outcomes as we saw, right? So there might be hallucinations. So I've seen hallucinations sometimes where you get a response that it seems plausible and it's very sound what you're getting from the model, but it's completely inaccurate, right? So we can get that as well. And testing can be challenging. In this case, when I tested, I asked the model to produce a JSON document, which I could test. But then if I was receiving or getting a natural language, then probably we need to do another model to test the outcome, right? So, and it's still early days, and even the SDKs might be a bit buggy because are in preview. All right, any other questions? I think we might have 5 minutes probably or less for more questions.
Your tests were passing, why do you think it's early days?
Well, we saw it, right? I mean, it's only 13 test cases, right? So, and as I mentioned, when I started changing temperature, then I started getting unexpected behaviors with the same prompt. I didn't change, well, then I started playing with the prompts as well. Then I made it very specific, but then it was boring, right? I said, if it's too specific, it's going to be boring for the demo. So then I started removing lines of my prompt. And there you go, my demo failed. But yeah, it's good fun to learn together. Any other comments or, yeah?
Can you see the costs on the background on the Azure OpenAPI? Like, is it real time?
I don't remember.
It's part of cost management.
Yeah, cost management, yeah.
With token.
Yeah, so the API is the response with cost.
Yeah.
So it's the response header or the response body, so it
Yes.
has a cost. Not always accurate though.
Yeah, that's right. But you still will see the bill what you pay at the end. Like whatever we make now, you make 20 calls today, you should be able to get that bill.
Sure.
Unless it's free, right? It's not free. It still costs you.
Can you price the OPEX around it? Like, can you do a pricing estimate of the use case scenario?
If you know how many tokens you're going to pass in, yes.
There are scenarios where, but again, then I don't know if it's more costly just to calculate the cost, but I've seen there is a reference architecture from Microsoft where you put API management on top of your API. And then for certain prompts, I think you can calculate the tokens because you can do the tokenization before in advance. And then you have like subscription keys per cost center, for example, and then you charge back to the cost center, right? So if you're getting, I don't know, $100 per month, and then you get percentage usage per cost center, you can allocate that back to cost center. There is a reference implementation on GitHub for that.
API monetization.
Similar, but in this case, it's not per call because it is not just the call, it's also the size of the prompt because they charge per tokens. So all their natural languages get translated into tokens, and they charge per token. Yeah.
API management, you can do a policy to do not rate limiting, cost limiting.
Yeah. Caching your cost. Alrighty.
Question.
Yep. Oh, question. Yeah.
Yeah. So I noticed that it is deployed in Azure Cloud, like in the model, right?
Yep.
And what's the difference between this model and OpenAI?
Yeah. So the main model is that. So the main difference is same model, right? Same model, but you get the governance on top. So for example, you can create a private endpoint on top of your API, meaning you can only call it from within your network, right? So you can create a private endpoint within Azure. I'm not too sure about security. I don't know if you can use RBAC already for the endpoints. I'm not too sure. David, have you seen it?
Not the endpoint for the service, but it's very clunky.
Okay, only on key at the moment, yeah. But eventually, I'm sure eventually you will get RBAC on top of your endpoint. But you can use, for example, API management on top, and then you can do RBAC from your client into API management, and then API management to your private endpoint, for example, right? But then you need to have a very, very safe or secure key management for that. Yeah. And then privacy as well. I think the agreements in terms of data privacy are different when you use it through Azure than if you go directly to an OpenAI. So you get more privacy, I think.
There is another advantage of using API management is for reliability. For example, you can run multiple versions of this API, but your API management will expose only one. So like if one of them dies, it still will be working through load balancer, like for HA, for high availability. It's really cool. It's just an API. All this AI is just API. And the model itself. The model itself.
So it's like this one is
You understand about model itself, like from AI perspective.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if, I mean, I know that at the moment,
not at all. But heaps of fun.
so I'm not too sure if there is, I know that at the moment there is, so OpenAI has an agreement with Microsoft, but that only can be used through Azure in terms of enterprise solutions. But I don't know if there is, if OpenAI is releasing models before directly and then releasing it to Azure. Azure, I don't know. Right? I don't know those details. But in like for example, GPT and all of those, I think they are kind of they are released almost at the same time. Alrighty. Thank you so much for joining me, and enjoy the rest of the day.